Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick. I am a director of engineering on the Xbox Player Experiences and Platforms team. Not really relevant to what we're doing today. I also help to run management excellence programs across gaming, which is more about what we're here to talk about. So what does management excellence mean to us at Microsoft? It's encapsulated by two sets of principles, which everyone in the room here who is from Microsoft or from Xbox is like, yes, I've seen this a billion times. Everyone else, it's the kinds of principles that help us guide the way that we manage and the way that we lead to make sure that we're doing the best we can for our teams and for our culture. The leadership principles here, leadership applies, of course, to managers as well as everyone else. We're asked to create clarity in ambiguous situations, help pave the way for our teams to work towards goals that make sense. We're asked to generate energy. This is about building great teams, helping to make our teams in the future stronger than the teams today, both as a group and on an individual career level. And of course, we're asked to deliver success. Hopefully relatively self-explanatory. Everyone and their teams is looking for that. More specifically for managers, we also have a set of principles that is about how we go about doing these jobs and how we go about our day-to-day. This is more about the how of how we suffuse our work. We're asked to model the principles that we want our teams to follow, to basically be able to say, do as I do, not just do as I say. We're asked to coach people to become stronger individuals, to stretch themselves, to take on new challenges. And as human beings, we're asked to care about each other and care about the work that each other does, care about each other's success. So a couple months ago, we sat down and said, what are the things we want to talk about at GDC? And the idea came up around what exactly is the intersection between management and culture? And for 5 or 6 seconds, we were like, well, we've got these principles. And if you dive into them, there's a lot about these principles that get into culture of teams. And then after about 5 or 6 seconds, we realized we do that a lot internally. And we get a lot of managers who are like, yeah, smile and nod. We've heard this, we get this, but it's all really abstract and we have jobs to do. And how is it that we're supposed to take any of this and make it matter in our day-to-day? And so over the last couple of years, we've spent a lot of work to transform from this top-down principles-driven approach to one where we have a gaming manager community and a peer learning series where we have people talk about the day-to-day of how do we take these various principles and apply them to the problems that we're having or the situations that present themselves with us. And so we figured for this talk on management and culture, you'd probably not like to go through Microsoft Principles training. You'd probably rather hear more day-to-day practical advice. And so we're going to do something very similar to that here. We've got some of the most passionate folks from that manager community in gaming here today. And each of them has a little bit of a different take on how you can apply these principles to those day-to-day situations that really make a difference to the culture of your teams. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay, she, her, and I am Chief of Staff at the initiative.
I'm Mike, he, him. I am the Strategy and Operations Manager within Studios Quality, and I also work with University Recruiting for Xbox Game Studios.
Hi, everyone. I'm Luis Ángel Mesh, he, him. Or él en español. I'm a dev manager over in Trenton Studios, and I'm originally from Mérida, Yucatan, Mexico.
I'm Soren, he, him. I am the technical director for the engine team at the initiative, and I'm representing Denmark.
Awesome. So we have a little bit of a take on this topic from each of our panelists. We will have time at the end for questions or for follow-ups if any of you have them. So cue those up. You'll be able to come up to the mic and ask afterwards. But to get us started here, Lindsay, you and I actually go a ways back. We were involved in that journey of figuring out how to try and make some of this stuff more practical and how to form that gaming manager community. So tell me, what does that intersection of management and culture look like to you? Why are you passionate about this? What would you like to share with the crowd here?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Nick. And thank you to everybody for being here. I know it was, how many people came in yesterday? Yeah, yesterday? It was a harrowing journey. There was a moment where I was walking down the sidewalk at like 2:30 and there was an umbrella floating along without a person associated with it. It was something out of a Miyazaki movie. But yeah, so thank you for the question. I am very passionate about the intersection of management with culture, and I have thought a lot about this. I think some of my fascination with this came from the work that you just referenced in the gaming manager community. I think at that time when we started the community, we had this intuition that our managers were more than just models of values and paradigms of virtues and good company stewards of our mission. I think we recognized that they were really the glue that keeps teams together, and they model the face of confidence and security for our team, especially in an ever-changing time. But that recognition that they were very important to the culture, I think, came to the fore with a lot of data and research. We found this interesting stat that I wanted to share with everybody here because I think it illustrates how important managers really are to culture. And this is repeated company after company, year after year. And the stat is that of all the things people choose to stay or go at a company, like all the reasons why you can choose to stay or go, managers are often at the top of the list, if not the top reason why. And I think that really illustrates the power that role has on individuals and their individual culture. And to me, culture is defined as the environment around the work or the atmosphere around the work. That's my shorthand definition for it. And if that's the case, then I think it makes a lot of sense why managers are highly influential to that. They really do set up the environment for people to do their best work, to be their best selves and thrive. And then if you kind of multiply that by the fact that everybody has a manager, it is probably the most influential role across the company if you think about it from a numbers game. So my question is, when I think about it that way, if it is so influential, then how is it we influence more positive outcomes for culture? How is it we influence more positive experiences for people? What should we be doing and thinking about when it comes to that manager role to make it more influential? And to me, that really comes into the inputs of the role. What are all of the principles and values we want this role to have? What are all the priorities and accountabilities we want this role to have? What does success look like in this role? What are our qualifications we're looking for, and motivations and attributes? What's all that stuff that needs to go into the formula to more positively impact culture and people's experience? And in fact, I think a lot of companies are sort of catching up to the fact that this role of manager is something special to culture and its own unique job. We at Microsoft, actually, Kevin's here with me, have just went through a multi-year, I pointed you out, Kevin, yes, no pressure. Just went through a multi-year modernization of our career architecture. And one distinct feature of that is that this role of manager is its own job with its own set of priorities and accountabilities and own measurement in its performance review, I think really indicating that it is something special to culture. That is what people are measured on when they're in people manager roles, is how successful they are influencing culture in a positive way and taking care of their people. So long story short, yes, I have thought a lot about that role of manager and how it relates to culture, and particularly why it's important to get it done well and make sure that people are taken care of.
So you're right, and I've been along a lot of that journey as well. I've been at Microsoft long enough. That wasn't always the way, right? When we were here 15 years ago, management was just kind of this tack-on thing. And there was the philosophical shift for us into this idea of separating out those skills. If you happen to be in a position where you can engineer a shift like that, that's great. And that's a nice position to be in, and you can think about whether that makes sense for you. There's a lot of companies in which that's not the current philosophy, right? It still is a little more of a blend, or it's seen as something that you do in addition to the other work you do as a manager. So for the folks whose companies still work that way, or for whom their day-to-day looks like that, how do they take any of this thinking or this work and apply it to their situation?
Yes, you are right. Everything I just said there sounds really good on paper. And wouldn't it be great if we all work for companies where I could spend years retooling the career architecture such that the people manager role was distinct and you could choose to go down that path or not. But I agree. I think many of us find our first manager job because we're the next in line, or there isn't anyone else to do it, or you're good at your job and somehow people think that you're going to be good at management too. I think for me, a lot of the things that I said about the inputs to the role equaling out to a positive culture and positive impact on people's experience still applies. And I have a few sort of cultural hacks when it comes to that. If you find yourself in a position where you are a new manager or in a new job and you have to add that to your day, how do you sort of quickly have a positive impact on culture? I got 4 hacks for that. My first hack is you can still design your own role even as you're in it. And in fact, I think there's some benefit to doing that while you're in the job. Crowdsource what good looks like as a manager, ask your leader, Ask the people who report to you and say, hey, I care about getting this done well. What does good look like to you? Where should I be spending my time? How should I be measured on this? And what you've effectively done is manage everybody's expectations on where you're going to spend your time and manage your own expectations on what people are expecting of you. And I think that both has a positive influence on culture. And it also, I think, encourages feedback culture where you're inviting people to tell you what you need to know. And that, I think, has a good impact on culture as well. So that's tip number one, is go ahead and design that role and get people to buy into that and be invested in your success with you. Tip number two is consider a set of values and principles. And I know those words, values and principles, rings a little corporate-y or a little jargony. But I like them because I actually think of them as an instruction manual, like a quick start guide on how you can have good impact right away. We have the ones, Model Coach and Care, that Nick referenced earlier. And I look at those as like, if you do nothing else, if you've taken no manager trainings at all, if all you did was Model Coach and Care as your quick start guide, you will have a positive influence on culture. So that's your cheat sheet, I think. Culture hack number three is put your people first. Oftentimes management is added to our responsibilities and we're sort of expected to load balance that. And even if you only have 5% or 10% of your time, make sure that goes to your people first. That's the front end of your day, not the back end of your day or the thing that you push off when you get busy. And I actually think this serves multiple purposes. It says something about culture, which is you want to have a people first culture. And by the way, people want to work at a company that has a people first culture. And it does something for culture too. One of the great things about putting your people first is if you think that your job as a manager is to set people up for success and make sure that they're doing their best work, you can do that and kind of set it, not exactly forget it, but people will be off doing their best work. It actually makes more time for you as a manager to go complete the rest of your job, the other 95% of the job that you need to do. So now you're doing your best work. So everybody's doing their best work and feeling fulfilled and satisfied. So that's good for culture. And by the way, it's good for the business too, because everyone's doing their best work. So it's a win-win-win. And then my last cultural hack, I think, is the most important of them all. And it is that you don't have to guess what good culture is. I think there's a lot of us who join in a manager role or a new leadership role, and there's this expectation that we're just supposed to know what good culture is, and the enlightenment has come, and we've cracked the code to it. But the truth is, you don't have to guess. You can just ask. You can just ask people what good culture is, and they will tell you. And it's much faster than spending years of training trying to figure out the theory behind good culture. So, if you got people reporting to you, just sit them down and say, hey, I care about you. I want you to do your best work. I want this to be a trusted relationship that grows in time. What do you need? How can I help you? And how can we set up an environment where I'm giving you feedback and you're giving me feedback? I think the trick there is that a lot of times it can take time for that relationship to build. Sometimes people's instincts is to tell you what they think you want to hear rather than what they actually need. So you're going to have to give it a couple of revs, I think, before you get there. But if you keep testing it and saying, is this working? Is this working? People will eventually tell you. I think the same thing goes with your whole team. You don't have to guess what good team culture looks like. You just sit everybody down and say, hey, I want to have good team culture. What does that look like for us? What are those agreements we want to make as a team? How do we want to communicate with one another? How do we want to respect each other's time? How do we want to give each other feedback in a psychologically safe way? How do we want to handle conflict in a constructive way? How do we want to celebrate the wins or have fun together or give each other praise? What does that look like for us? And have everybody contribute to that and offer insights into that and craft those agreements together. And what you've effectively done there is remove that responsibility of good culture solely on your shoulders and put it back on the collective to say, now it's all of our responsibilities and now we're all going to hold one another accountable for it. So it's very beneficial to you as a manager where now you don't have to guess and now you can share that responsibility. And again, that one for me, asking people what they need kind of says something about culture and does something for culture. It says you want people's feedback, you want to give them a seat at the table, you trust them to be able to run the business with you. And it also does something for culture because in theory, if they were telling you what they really needed, you're going to have a better culture the day after you have those agreements in place than the day before you had them. So those are 4 hacks there. My 5th hack, which I unscripted, but My fifth hack is just say thank you to people a lot as well. I think this is a really important cultural hack. Like, show people you appreciate them. I feel like we don't say that enough to one another generally, and to the people reporting to us. You should care that they're there and doing their best work and trying to grow. And I think a thank you goes a long way for that. So those are my hacks. I'll repeat them again. You can design your own role and get people's input on what good looks like. You don't have to guess. You can create a set of values and principles as your quick start guide to having impact on culture right away. You can put your people first. That's a win-win-win for everybody. And lastly, you don't have to guess what good culture looks like. You can just ask and people will tell you. So wrapping it all back up, as I said, even if you don't have the luxury of a company that designs that job for you, you can do it yourself with intention and have a positive influence on culture on the back end. Back to you, Nick.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, for sharing that with us and all of those hacks. The fourth one about asking your team about this, it seems pretty obvious. Many of you may have tried this before. If you're like us who have tried this internally, if it's the first time you've tried it or you've gone before, it's a little bit discouraging when you go out and ask that question. You get a bunch of blank stares and you get a bunch of people who are like, what are you asking me for? It's your job to set the culture. It's okay. And it doesn't mean it's a thing to give up on. One thing that I think is really important for you to remember is just by putting the topic on the table, you're indicating that this matters to the organization. It matters to you. It matters to the team. And it doesn't have to get solved tomorrow. It doesn't have to be a discussion that's really productive next week. People will think about it. People will recognize that you're open to having that conversation. And eventually that will happen in a way that won't if you don't set it up as a fair game discussion topic. So don't give up on it if it doesn't feel comfortable from the beginning.
Mic's off. Is it on?
Or you can have that conversation at happy hour. I think that'll speed it.
At happy hour, yes. Over a lot of thank yous. Mike, you are in a little bit of a similar situation to me. We've got kind of our regular jobs, managing part of the business, and then you have this thing on the side that you do that looks a little bit more like that intersection between management and culture. So how have you been involved in management decisions that you think really have an impact on culture on your team?
Yes, I think one of the places that we impact culture is hiring, right? With people come from culture, or people come from culture. Culture comes from people. That makes more sense. And people come from hiring. And if we're not really mindful about how we bring people onto the team, how we grow our teams, it really impacts the quality of that long-term culture and the overall health of the team.
So makes sense, right? Culture comes from people. Hire great people who care about culture. Done. Should be straightforward. What are what makes this hard?
A number of things. And so I'll kind of come at this from a little bit from the university recruiting side of when a position opens up, when we're hiring someone from the team or for the team, whether that's the team is growing or we're replacing someone, there's kind of that initial impulse to find the most senior person you can, find the most experienced person you can, or find a clone of the person who left. And if we do that over time, we can end up with a team that is all senior individuals. Well, what does that do? If we think of the team as kind of an ecosystem, those individuals may be competing for the same opportunities, the same growth. And it can create unhealthy competition, which then degrades culture. And so if we kind of think about the balance of the team and encouraging teams to be mindful of not only the needs today, but the needs of the future and where we want those teams to go and what we want the shape of that team to be, we can be a lot more effective. And so thinking about, what are the skills that someone has to have coming into the role, and what are the skills that they could learn on the job, right? What are the things that they could grow into? And using that process and that mindfulness to create the job descriptions, to create the recs, and really approach, filling positions from not only today, but the future as well.
So that makes sense, right? You want to avoid stagnancy. You want to avoid having a team where everyone works the same way or thinks the same way. So be mindful about the blueprint. Be mindful about the shape of the team that you're trying to build and make sure that has a broader set of perspectives, a broader set of cultural viewpoints. So is that basically it? You build the blueprint, you make sure everyone knows we're looking to actually broaden our perspectives, and then everything works out?
Yeah, step one, just done. It's fine. No, not quite. So the next part is actually hiring, right? So you've posted the position, you figured out what it is that you're looking for, and making sure that we keep that in mind as we're going through the full hiring process, and that we're screening in, right? And I'll paraphrase Ratatouille. Not anyone can be a great chef, but a great chef can come from anywhere. And having that mindset and looking for folks that have those potential skills, potential ways to contribute to the team, can really help us build a culture that enables everyone to do their best work. And kind of just from a practical standpoint, one of the things that's worked well for us is, as the resumes come in, as we go through, as we identify, there's going to be a large number of people that meet those core criteria, the things that they have to be able to do. Then you'll start to see patterns and buckets of folks who are really good at kind of A and B, but may need a little bit of growth with C, or people who are good at B and C might need some growth in A. And if we look at those groups, and we make sure that we're kind of selecting candidates to interview from each of those clusters, we're helping overcome any sort of unconscious bias that we might have around, I didn't think I was prioritizing this skill set, but oops, I accidentally did. And so as those candidates are selected, as we bring them into the interview pool, we then also have to think about who's doing the interviewing, right? Making sure that we have individuals that can help assess those skills, help assess that potential, setting expectations at the right level, which is especially important for college hiring, making sure we have kind of clarity of expectation there. And then really just, again, kind of keeping that holistic approach as we're bringing people in, and that we're really identifying, who will help address opportunities within the team and help build the team to where we want it to be, and where it will enable us to be healthiest for the future.
Which isn't the same as saying, well, you can ignore all those requirements or all that technical stuff, right? It's not saying culture takes the place of all that stuff. It's that you need to think about that as a piece of it intentionally if you want that to be part of what you get out of the process.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that starts really early on, right? If you think about the life cycle of people on your team, if you think about your team as a whole and what you do as a manager, this is from the very beginning, before you've even decided who's going to be on your team, that you start to shape the way the culture of the team works. So, Luis, you have been doing this for a while. Also, you've got your own take on the intersection between management and culture. So what have you found is an area that is really meaningful to how manager behavior translates into the culture of the team?
Yeah, I think for me, one area that's particularly important is on the choices the managers or the team leaders make to find a balance across when the leader or the manager needs to be very hands-on, very active in some work stream, in some project, versus when they should be delegating, versus when they should be offering opportunities for the team to take on those challenges and grow, right? And also the awareness and the humility to recognize when the team may need help to hit the goals or to hit the deadlines that they're working on, and being that person that helps, that builds the bridge to get that help, or provide that help to an adjacent team in the organization. So those choices are very important for culture.
So do you see what kinds of things go wrong when you don't get that right?
Yeah, so I can actually offer an example from my own path as a manager. So this happened. I had already been a manager for a couple of years on a small team, 6 people, on a code base that I was very familiar with, and so then I took a job at a different studio. 12 people, managing 12 people, so twice as big of a team, brand new code base, different programming language. So I was like I didn't know anything about the tech. And so I felt this pull to go deep into the details for the tech, right? Like go in the code and fix a bug or whatever, right? Like do something, because I felt like I was not the right person maybe to be managing that team, right? And what happened is, I in the first couple of weeks I was in that team, I focused on those details for a day or two, and after that I realized that just by kind of slowing down on my collaboration with the rest of the team and email responses and teams and stuff, I missed on a bunch of strategic conversations, or I was kind of the bottleneck for some of those conversations, and through that I was doing a disservice to me, to the team, and to the studio at large, right? And so that was a pretty big lesson for me to learn.
I think that is one of those lessons that most people go through. I can't think of any new managers I've talked to who don't go through that set of challenges of how am I supposed to figure out when I'm supposed to delegate this to someone and when I'm supposed to do it myself, especially when, for a lot of you, you're there because you're better at it than the people who are on your team. And I don't know that that's just for new managers either. I will guess that if all of you think back to the last 6 months, have you had that moment of man, it would really just be a lot easier if I did this myself? I see a lot of nods right now already. So that makes sense, and I think it's part of everyone's experience. I think it is something that is a core management challenge. What does that have to do with culture?
Yeah, I think as we let's say, as a manager, as a leader, you are trying to get to that balance of autonomy and guidance across the team. What that's going to turn into is people are going to be constantly growing and learning. They'll have the right challenges and opportunities to build their skill set, to try new things, to maybe try leadership, technical leadership, or people leadership roles within the team. And through all of that, the team, the organization will start feeling like there's a long-term path for success for the business, but also for your own career. And that's something that we really need in the gaming industry these days, right? Like the realize or be in a place where you can think that, oh yeah, I can be in this career for the long run as my own life changes, as I go through different personal life stages and stuff, right? And all that generates positive culture, right? Like if you are in that environment, you're energized, you are happy, you are, you build that passion, and that passion becomes contagious with the rest of the team. And it just turns out to be a great place to work, right? Now, on the other end of the spectrum, and referring back a little bit to my example, let's say you're a new manager and trying to get in the details, and you can quickly turn that into kind of a micromanagement style, which is not great. It's pretty bad for culture, right? Like in the sense that you start getting into the details, and you may end up consciously or unconsciously pushing your team to do work the way you will have done it, the way the manager will have done it themselves, right? And that's limiting creativity, that's limiting, growth, that's breaking trust with the employee, right? And it's just detrimental to the team culture, right? That's kind of one of, if that keeps going on, employees themselves may start asking, why am I even here if I'm just being told what to do, right? I don't have autonomy, I don't have a path to grow, right? But there are also some cultural challenges on the other end of the spectrum. Let's say you're an experienced manager, your team has been, it's just doing great, right? And delivering on time and just doing everyday work, at great quality and stuff, right? There is a risk that you can end up in this kind of complacent mode where you just keep doing the same thing you've been doing the last few days, few months, few weeks, few years, right? And that can still feel good, and you probably still delivering value for the studio or the company, right? But there's a risk that just by getting so complacent, you can ignore potential opportunities to do more, to do better, to help the rest of the studio, right? And so having that awareness as a manager as to, hey, maybe there's opportunity to do more, and setting up the team for those opportunities, it can be also a great cultural multiplier.
So you mentioned opportunity, autonomy, growth. All these things are things that we all kind of understand, even for ourselves, let alone our teams. Those are important parts of our experience at work. And like Lindsay mentioned, that atmosphere in which we have good culture or not. On the flip side of that, part of our role as managers also is to make sure that people can do so safely, right? That they're gonna have guidance, that we're not gonna let them fail, that if the challenge that we're asking them to go after is a little bit beyond them, it's okay. We'll be there to catch when things stumble a little bit and nothing bad's gonna happen. And if you think about this idea of making sure they have challenges and can grow and autonomy, and also making sure that they feel safe and that nothing bad is going to happen, they're a little bit at odds with each other. How do you find the balance between those? And how do you recognize that the balance there isn't quite there?
Yeah, so I think one of the first things that comes to mind is that balance is always changing. So it's not like, okay, my team is perfect and everybody's doing what they're great at doing and I'm great at doing my strategic thing and we're done, right? The business, the team themselves, they probably be changing and shifting, and through that, that balance will need to be readjusted, right? Could be external factors, right? You could be, you're preparing to enter into concept stage for a new project, or pre-production, or production, or about to ship, right? And depending on that, the balance may be different, or it could be, individual circumstances, like someone is taking a new role elsewhere, or someone is going on a leave for a couple months or something like that, right? And those are opportunities to find, to try to find that balance and offer the right level of challenge to the rest of the team, right? So now, to do that, I think we have to be, as managers, as leaders, very intentional in the sense that maybe these are just some suggestions, right? You can do your own thing, right? But maybe find a cadence where it's good to check with the team or check with your peers as to finding that balance, right? That cadence could be, I don't know, if you're doing sprints, maybe every sprint, or quarterly milestones, or whenever we're entering or exiting a big stage in the production process, right? And then, or it could be, when the team size is changing, or as I mentioned, when the team's personal circumstances change and they want a different thing, right, within the group, right? And so once we think about that cadence, then it's like, well, what should I be doing as a manager to figure out what is that balance, right? And I think, again, going back with the intentionality, right? Like asking these questions from you and from your team, right? Like, are you excited, right? Are you excited to work here? Are you bored? Do you think you're learning? Do you see yourself growing into a technical expert in this group, or a people leader, or a culture leader in this studio, right? And then as a manager, asking, am I spending my time in a way that really empowers the organization, or am I just staying in my comfort zone, as I mentioned, just doing the job that I had, 6 months ago or 2 months ago that led me to this job that I have now, right? So asking those things. And now the something that we should also be aware as managers is that people's communication styles are different. And so some of your reports, some of your teams, they'll raise their hand, right? They won't wait for you to ask. They'll say, I want more. I want to deliver more impact, and I see a problem there, and I want to go and fix it. And that's great, right? That makes your job as a manager easy, right? But the fact that other people may be a little bit more quiet doesn't mean that they don't have anything more to offer, or that they don't want to do more, right? And that's when you as a manager need to establish that bridge, that communication bridge, and find the right communication style and the right questions to ask to ensure that you're listening to the whole team, yeah? And through that, offering all these opportunities that will empower them to deliver more on the professional side and grow that culture in a positive way.
That's great, and very similar to what Lindsay and Mike said. It's about being intentional with how you work with your team individually as a whole. So Mike talked about building our teams and doing that intentionally with culture in mind and how we can affect things that way. Luis, you're talking a little bit about what it means to work with our teams when they're formed and make sure that we're suffusing culture into that. Gets more complex, right, Soren? It's not just about your own team. What is your management experience told you about some of the cultural challenges that we all face?
So to add an extra layer of complexity, not just managing your own team, but once you start to talk about multiple teams working together, and there's a lot of interesting dynamics there that's good to be aware of. And it's something you're going to see much more. We already started to see more games that are now made by multiple studios within the same publisher working together, or you have engine teams across shared amongst multiple projects across multiple time zones, multiple continents, or you have lots of teams that have a co-dev relationship with 1 or 2 or 5 external companies. So common for all of those cases is that you have multiple teams that all have to figure out how to work together and really understand each other to collaborate efficiently.
So why does culture even come into play here, right? You've got your team, you've got this partner team, we're taking care of this part of the game, you're taking care of that part of the game, we'll meet in the middle and everything's going to be great.
I mean, that's one way to approach the problem, right? It's you start off by splitting up the task, and it might seem like it goes okay in the beginning, right? You start to see some progress, but you should really take the time to discuss culture and figure out how, like, not just what do we do, but how do we do it. Once you add another team in, you have like twice as much capacity. You're really excited. You want to get going. Like, let's just assign out some tasks. But it's important to remember that different companies, different teams, you all have your own working style. Like whether you focus on innovation or you're heavily process-driven or growth, or whatever it is that drives each team, it's different, and there's no right or wrong way to run a team. Well, there might be some that are slightly better than others, but really it depends a lot on what works for your team and for what project you worked on. And it's important to remember that whether you've talked about it as a team or not, you have a culture, and it's easy to forget, especially the longer you work together. If you have the same bunch of people that work together for 10 years, it might become really implicit and unspoken, like this is just how we do things. And the more you have people that have only ever worked in one place, like it's something that you might not be talking about, right? And I think it's an easy trap to fall into, that when you start to work with someone and if you have respect for someone, if there's a mutual respect to start out with, great. But you can fall into the trap that, hey, I like your work, so I assume that you're working kind of similar to me. Like we kind of have the same way of looking at things, but that's when you can speak past each other. You can be solving problems the wrong way or solving the wrong problems. You can spend way too much time on something that maybe the expectation from the people you're working with is that let's just quickly put something together, right? So you can end up wasting a lot of time. That's why it's important to talk about this early on. And it's also important that this is not a leadership exercise. This is something that has to have, the whole team has to be bought in.
So it's not fine. You can't just split it up and never talk. You are actually collaborating. You have to work together. You want to make sure that you've had the conversations to understand working styles and bridge communication styles and all of that. How do you actually suggest that a team go about doing that? What are practical ways to establish those understandings?
Well, I think some of the same playbook that Lindsay was talking about, I think that works here, right? Putting together some kind of team agreements that cover a lot of these practical things. Like, what do you value together across the teams? What is your priorities? But also basic things like, how do we communicate? Like, what do we use Teams for, or Slack, or versus what do you use email for? I worked on a team that nobody checked email except maybe every other week. But if other people expect that I send you a message and that there should be a reply right away, like that's going to be like a disappointment. Like, there's going to be problems with that approach. So agreeing on how to work together, and maybe create it as some kind of document that you keep on working on. Because it's culture, it's not a one and done thing, right? It's, you start on it, you get everyone to agree on both sides, and you make sure that the whole team sees and acknowledges this, and especially also what we expect of each other, but also what we expect of ourselves. Like how do we react to things that we see, right?
Okay, so take the time to be intentional, take the time to be deliberate, figure out how you're going to work together. That is an investment you make early in a working relationship to make sure that you're going to be able to work effectively and you'll get more stuff done in the longer term. So you've built your team agreement, you've sorted out all those communications, now you're set, right? Like you have full understanding, everyone's culture is kind of going to come together, everything's going to be great. You can kind of go into technical mode after that, right?
Yeah, that works for a little while maybe, but not always. Like when you start going, it's not a smooth ride the whole time, right? I want to quote MTV's The Real World has an intro that starts with when people stop being polite and start being real. That happens all the time when you start to work together as a larger group. And I think it's actually a healthy thing that there's some friction happening in any kind of group dynamics. There's an article that was written 60 years ago that's still relevant today, explaining some of this, called The 4 Stages of Group Dynamics. And it covers some common patterns that you see in a lot of groups coming together. There's the 4 stages. The first one is forming. As a group is forming, everyone's on their best behavior. We really want to be polite, and we're very careful and make sure not to step on toes, and we really try to talk about everything and make sure everyone hears what we're saying. But then as you move forward, when you get to the storming phase, that's when it starts to get, differences start to appear between the two groups, right? Or two or more groups, right? Because it can be very complex. As differences start to appear and there can be a little bit of friction, or you can see that there's not as much progress as you would expect and you would hope. As you work through all of this, you get into the norming phase, which is things kind of, you work out the differences more and more, and you work better together. And in the end, hopefully, as you would get to the 4th stage, which is the performing stage. At this point, you work out your differences. You work seamlessly together as one team. And it doesn't mean that everyone works the same and thinks the same, but we understand each other and we get the most out of each other's strengths, right? And so that's the stage you want to get to. And the other thing is, when you get to the performing stage, it should be a system that kind of self-reinforces. When there are little conflicts happening here and there, or little disagreements, people are aware of it and detect it and automatically self-correct. So that's kind of where you want to get to. And so the reason I think it's important to talk about culture as a team together is simply by being aware that these kind of things happen, these patterns are normal, and by being aware of what you expect of each other and of yourself, you'll be noticing these patterns, and you will be working them out and gradually move you further down the chain of the stages. And it's also important to note that just because you get to a certain stage doesn't mean that you're staying there. Like at some point, if you don't keep on focusing on the culture, it is definitely possible to regress back to an earlier stage and have to rework everything. That's why culture you have to work on as a team, whether it's one team or multiple teams working together.
One of the other important elements, part of why we talk about how you want to treat culture as its own first-class citizen, so to speak, people kind of have an understanding when it comes to technically working together. That performing stage isn't really, now you are never going to run into conflict again. Now you are never going to run into a problem again. Nobody expects that, right? We're working on hard problems. We're solving difficult technical situations. You're going to run into bumps. Performing is about knowing how you as a team are going to come together and overcome them in a successful way, not about never running into them. That's true culturally as well. you're going to run into people who don't get along or people who don't do things in the same way, and someone's going to accidentally offend someone else or whatnot else. It's not about not running into those situations. It's about understanding that you have a common system, a common understanding, a common goal to work together to overcome those rather than let them be this thing that really tears your team apart. So appreciate your thoughts, all four of you, on that. If any of you have any questions for any of the group or have any questions in general around management and culture, there's a mic in the middle. I invite you all to come up. Come on up if you wanted to ask something.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Great, thanks. Yeah, happy to be here. James McGraw from Bellevue, Washington. I am our Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Manager for Tech Systems Gaming Division. So really happy to be here. Happy to see some of my neighbors. First of all, I've had the pleasure to talk to some of your peers, not only at GDC, but back home. And the word that always came up was intentionality. And listening to you four talk, it's clear that it is about intentionality. You all are moving with intention, thinking with intention, and that's one of the biggest things in this. And so in my role, I came here to talk some questions about some of the biggest things in gaming, in my opinion, which is attracting and retaining diverse talent, but also creating an inclusive work culture to keep them. And you all address those beautifully. So thank you for that. So this is an ad hoc question, but Mike, you hit on it a little bit, but when you think about and look at underrepresented minority organizations and cultures and groups, women, especially women of color, and that junior to entry level position, I think we could argue that that's probably the most underrepresented field in gaming today. So could you talk a little bit about how Xbox and the studios beneath Xbox have been intentional about building programs around inclusivity and ramp up to production? Because I think that's a big one too, is that, that fear that I'm not contributing the way I should be. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, James. Mike, did you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah. So I think one place I'll start is just university recruiting in general, right? And that's a great source of early and career talent. And part of the pipeline that we have for basically finding candidates from the schools includes a lot of that, right? It's looking at not necessarily just top 10 schools. We're looking across the country at every possible university, wherever the talent is coming from. We're looking at increasing opportunities for very early in career, I would say. So like freshmen in college, we have interns that will come in that early. And so really looking to find the talent where it is and where it's being developed and bring it in and nurture that and embrace it as part of our growing culture from the ground up there.
Something I'd love to add to that, again, getting to watch this evolution over time. One of the things that's become a bigger element of our recruiting process is recognizing that opportunity and potential or talent don't innately line up with each other. That in some cases, right, we want to believe that that is the case. We want to believe we work in a place or in a society or in a world in which that's the case. Sometimes it does work out that way. Sometimes it doesn't. And there are people who, by virtue of any number of things outside of their control, don't ever reach that step of having the opportunity to show that skill. And that is a cycle that you can disrupt at any stage in the process by saying, hey, we're going to look outside of the people who have had opportunities up to this point, and we're going to provide that stepping stone for them to jump on board if they've got that interest and that passion and that skill set and that willingness. And so a lot of the programs that Mike is talking about are exactly about that. We have pivoted from saying, let's go to all the top-ranked tech schools in the country, right? Or let's go just hire from the schools that build gaming-specific curriculums and say, well, really, there's probably a lot of people who we could teach to do this just as well, if not better, who didn't have a chance to go to that school for a bunch of reasons that have nothing to do with their skill set. Mm-hmm. And we are going to be better off as a team, as a company, as an industry, if we start to recognize that that potential exists and we give those people a chance to take an on-ramp into the system. And so that is something where I like calling that out, because I think to whatever degree people in the room have the ability to influence recruiting or to influence the way that they think about hiring, you want to realize that. You want to recognize that you have a chance to affect this by providing extra opportunity. But I get it. If many of you are not deeply embedded into recruiting, if you're not deeply embedded into these systems, what is the way that you are providing opportunity for people? If it's people you personally know, or if it's kids of friends, or if it's teaching at local high schools and as volunteers, or whatever that is, how do you find that personal way that you're trying to bridge that gap between potential and opportunity.
Thank you. Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, I have.
Can you hear me? Is this working?
I thought that was a great question too, because I think instinctually we think that the talent is going to come to us, and we'll just have the plethora of people to choose from. And I agree with you that sometimes it is about us going out and finding the talent and saying, we believe in you and we think that you can do this. And we have a program called Game Camp, and you don't have to have any experience at all in gaming. You can be from any walk of life. You just have to have a passion for games, and we will figure out how to put that passion to work so that you can, engage those skills. And it's I think offering those kinds of opportunities to say, maybe you don't know you have an interest in games, but we like to give you a chance to be creative, and hopefully it will spark something. And there are lots of programs like that too, like Girls Who Code and Girls Who Game. Like get in there and say, we'll be there for you to show you the way. And if it's a passion you're interested in, like let's keep it going.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is us just getting out there and
Amazing. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the question, James.
Hi, sorry to keep us on the recruiting track, but you talked about recruiting for culture, and I was really interested if you put any process or structure in place for judging the culture. It's very easy to homogenize your group just through the same culture, bringing in additional people who think the same way. So I'm wondering if you have anything that actually builds a process or anything.
Yeah, so our kind of cultural pillars are accountability, integrity, and respect. Those are kind of the three that we use across Microsoft. And you're right, it is very easy to affinity for sameness, effectively. And so there is kind of a challenge in that. And a lot of the ways we can address it, some of it's what I talked about in terms of being able to abstract information from the resumes, from the applicants, and kind of look at it in that sense. Another is thinking about how we build our interview panels and making sure that we have as diverse and as representative of a thought process from those interviewers as we can, so that we are balancing each other. We're covering for other biases that we may have individually, but collectively, we've hopefully kind of evened a lot of that out. There will be kind of different cultures within one studio to the next, and some of that's just kind of inherent to that team and the way they work. And so it's not necessarily looking for identical or for perfectly the same, but it's looking for weird analogy, but kind of like a harmony, right? You're looking for another note that adds to the collective and really helps kind of broaden and stay within the same culture, but also allow it to evolve and grow.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up. Is that just you're respecting the subjective nature of it, or do you actually do like training to specifically look for culture?
We do have specific training around removing, unconscious bias, being aware of it. A lot of it's hard, right? It's kind of human nature. We just have inherent biases, but being more aware of it, being more proactive about finding ways to mitigate it, has kind of been a key approach for us.
Cool, thank you.
Hi there, my name's Jake. I'm a senior operations manager at Gearbox for our online back-end online game engine team. Thanks so much for giving the talk. It was great to hear from each of you. I wrote some of this down because I'm nervous and I don't want to forget what I'm asking in general. I'm a new manager. I have a great group of leaders that I can rely on to teach me more about making sure that my teammates are cared for and that we're growing them in the right way, which is fantastic. I'm very confident in specifically our department's culture, making sure that people are cared for, especially our junior team members. What I'm more concerned about as operations manager is that my purview is very broad, and it also extends to our senior leaders like you all that are managing those team members. And in my mind, we can use intrinsic motivators like autonomy, mastery, purpose to make sure that they're motivated and continue to feel good about what they do. But there's part of me that worries year after year, month after month, like maybe this will be the end for them here, and I really don't want to lose them as team members. What is it that motivates you all to stay where you are or continue to grow? What do your managers do that really fuels you and makes sure that you feel cared for? Sorry, I know.
It's a great question. I appreciate you sharing with us. Luis.
So through my career, I've been in Microsoft for 18 years, and I've been in Xbox for 13 years. And the technology industry is like this, right? Like you kind of, it's always on the back of your mind, where am I going next, right? And every time I've had those thoughts, and I talk to either my current management chain or a peer or a mentor in the company, what I found that has made me stay in the role and try to grow in the roles I have in Xbox in particular, has been a lot of what I talked about actually, which is that balance, finding places where there's a good balance of guidance from my chain of command, and also autonomy and trust for me as an individual, and then as a manager, and now as a manager of managers, to try to do the best I can with the resources I have, learn, potentially fail, and then do better the next time. Right? So I think that's something that has kept me, and for from other people that have been at Microsoft for a long time, it's all a lot of it is about just being able to grow and having that balance of support and trust and autonomy.
Awesome.
Lindsay.
And for what it's worth, I'm nervous too. So
Yeah, sorry.
I have that in common.
Yeah.
I really like this question because I think it kind of harkens back to something I said earlier, which is I still don't think you have to guess on stuff like that, and it can take time to build rapport and have people tell you. But I think there's some tricks you can do for that too, establish some kind of questionnaire that you ask people. We actually have one at Microsoft, like a development plan, and ask different questions like, do you want to grow in your career? Are you interested in mobility? Do you want to get promoted one day?
Right.
And you almost make it multiple choice rather than open field so that people can select in what they're interested in. And now you know what they want to talk about and what they're motivated by. And, again, now you don't have to guess. And I think it's really helpful to find those good hacks and tools to get people telling you what they need. And sometimes it's not, it's not going to come just from you. I think there are different altitudes to have conversations with people. Like if you've got a manager and, maybe your manager can have a conversation with the people reporting to you as well, and see if these different altitudes can get at what people really need and want. And I think it's just creating a tool set, so that it's not just you trying to guess.
Absolutely.
Soren, do you want to add to that?
Well, I just also wanted to add that I love watching people grow. That's probably my number one joy as a manager, is try to train people up to be better, learn more. I keep on trying to find people and teach them everything I know so they can replace me, because that means I free up my own time so I can do more interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So that's always, that's a joy. It really comes back to the coaching and caring part to me.
Right. And I think Mike's initial statement of this ecosystem where people are trying to kind of vie for the same position, that is essentially my biggest fear, is getting all these people that want to be senior director or principal director of this and that, and not really having room, or not really knowing, well, what is the next step for these people? So
One thing I'd add on top of that, right? I think it's very natural and probably human nature of every manager to want to say, how am I going to keep these people? Really bad things are going to happen if these people leave.
Yeah.
We all feel that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But also, if the question for you is, how do I convince these people to stay? It's a tough track in and of itself, because you're in this reactive save mode.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And if you can flip that question, even though it doesn't feel as comfortable, to say, hey, what do you want next for your career? What is going to make you motivated? What is going to make you feel good about the next step for you? And for them to trust you and believe that you mean for that to be in the broad picture and not just, I'm trying to convince you that this spot is great.
Right.
Those conversations, kind of to Lindsay's point, will work themselves out to where you can find those opportunities in your organization to take them where they want to go, as opposed to feel like you're clinging on to people.
Yeah. All right.
And I have one more hack on that too.
You've got about 30 seconds to figure out.
Yes, and the hack is you can always ask why they want that too, and sometimes I think the answers will surprise you. Maybe it's they want to get promoted, or maybe they want more responsibility, and you can satiate that a different way.
Sure, just asking is better. Awesome. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jake. For everyone else in line right now, we want to be respectful of the needs of this room. The entire panel is going to be walking up to the Microsoft Lounge in the South Lobby, which is right by where you all registered right after this. So everyone in line, if you want to come with us, we're happy to follow up with your questions. Anyone else who wanted to follow up on any of this. If you take away one message from this, treat culture as a front and center thing in the things that you do. It doesn't have to be the only thing you talk about. doesn't have to be solved right away, but by setting that up as part of your conversation, you move things forward, and it will intersect with all the things you do in ways that aren't predictable. You just need to notice and take those on with intentionality. So we'll be heading up. Look forward to seeing a bunch of you there. If you want to recatch this session, it will be in the GDC Vault afterwards. There is more content like this on MicrosoftGameDev.com as well. If you follow us, I hear they have fancy socks, which I don't get, but is apparently a thing people like. And you can always follow up with anyone in the panel afterwards at managers@xbox@microsoft.com as well. So thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest of GDC.
Thank you.